Hi, Founder fans, Jason here, and today we are discussing Federal Farmer number 5, the fifth in a series of observations by Anti-Federalist, probably Melanchthon Smith, though we'll never know for sure. So Federal Farmer number 5 is supposed to have been the final paper by this particular Anti-Federalist. It was released in a series of pamphlets that ended up being wildly successful, and as we'll see in future weeks, they lived up to the hype by publishing more the following January. But this was published, as the first other four were, in October of 1787, just a month after the Constitution had been sent out to the world to be seen. Now, Federal Farmer number 5 is kind of a summation. Again, the author thinks this is the last paper he's going to write. Now, he acknowledges almost immediately that the Articles of Confederation need a change. A change is needed, and surprisingly, he actually admits that there are a lot of good things in the United States Constitution. But once again, he reminds his readers that we can't just accept this hastily. A lot of people want us to just ratify this right away, but we really need to analyze every word of this Constitution to make sure it is the government that we want. Now, he goes in pretty immediately and talks about factions. And factions at the time are what we would call political parties now. And he says there are two extreme factions at both ends of the spectrum. One, he at one point specifically refers to as Shays'ites, aka the Shays Rebellion, insurrectionists who want to overthrow the government and institute lawlessness. And he kind of doesn't really do the Shays Rebellion the justice it kind of deserves, because there were certain grievances there that could be seen as justified. He throws them off as crazy rebels, but he also then attacks what he calls aristocrats, aka the people from, he names Pennsylvania, but the wealthy elites who are trying to make this Constitution get passed right now. We need to do this right now or everything's going to go crazy. And the Federal Farmer points out that, well, most people are somewhere in the middle. Most people want law and order. They understand changes are necessary, but they don't necessarily think we need this government right now without thinking twice about it. And that is a reoccurring theme of the Federal Farmer. Hey, wait a second. Let's really consider this before we jump in. Now, the Federal Farmer even admits that should the Ratification Conventions, because the Constitution itself calls for Ratification Conventions to approve the Constitution. And he admits that, hey, if this is what the people want, I'll go along with it. But I just want to make sure everyone's really looking at all the details. And he kind of concludes, well, a big chunk of his conclusion is about amendments. Federal Farmer wants the Ratification Conventions, at the very least, to submit amendments if and when they ratify the Constitution. It's weird. He takes a more conciliatory tone than he has in the past. It almost feels like he assumes the Constitution will be ratified, so he's kind of casually this time referencing to the Ratification Conventions, hey, you really should get together and send in amendments and say, if you don't pass these amendments within a certain amount of time, then we are going to revoke our ratification. Now, this was illegal according to the Constitution, but it didn't prevent him from doing it. And several states actually did this, and it is a major reason the Bill of Rights gets created in the first place a few years later. To be fair, the Federal Farmer even acknowledges that these are separate ratification conventions from separate states with separate people, and therefore probably won't be able to get together in one large group. But if they all send in their amendments separately, then enough crossover will happen between the different recommended amendments that eventually actual amendments will be passed or sent through to the states, which assuredly would be passed, because even many of the Federalists did share some of the Anti-Federalist concerns with the government, the whole not giving freedom of speech, for example, and notably trials by jury and not having to go 1,000 miles for your jury. A lot of jury stuff. Those middle amendments in the Bill of Rights were actually some of the most concerns that Anti-Federalists had. And from there, the Federal Farmer acknowledges that, no matter what happens, we need to carefully reflect on this situation. It's just, again, like he had done so many times in the past, begs the reader not to hastily accept whatever government is thrown their way by a handful of people in Philadelphia, and instead really consider the decisions they're making for themselves and for their posterity. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely hit like. If you're new here, subscribe. I talk about the American Revolution 7 days a week, and I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.